Yeah. I had a grateful place. I didn't want my mom has nothing to subject. My mom is. Wow. All right, everyone, we're about ready to get started. So you can take your, well, I guess maybe you want. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, you don't wanna. Okay. All right, hi, everyone. My name is Angela. I am working in Claudia Jones School and GA pronouns. I'm going to introduce our program and the speakers today. So to give a little bit of background on this topic. In 2021, the Chinese government announced that extreme poverty has been abolished in China. We are a country of 1.4 billion people. And this historic victory is a culmination of a 7-decade-long process that began with the Chinese Revolution in 1949. The early decades of social construction laid the foundation that continued during the reform and opening up period. And during this time, 850 million Chinese people were lifted and lifted themselves out of poverty. So that means that 70% of the world's total poverty reduction has taken place in China. In the most recent phase that began in 2013, the Chinese government spent 1.6 trillion yuan, which is equivalent to 246 billion US dollars, to build 1.1 million kilometers of rural roads, bring internet access to 98% of the country's poor villages, renovate homes for 25.68 million people, and build new homes for 9.6 million others. Since 2013, millions of people, state-owned and private enterprises, and broad sections of society have been mobilized to ensure that China's remaining 98.99 million people from 832 counties and 128,000 villages exit absolute poverty. All this happening despite the pandemic, which of course started in 2020. So I'm really excited to have you all here with us today for this really important discussion. In light of announcing xenophobia against China and xenophobia, I think it's really important that we have this discussion and learn more about this issue and how this affects us as Americans and the way that U.S. aggression and imperialism towards China is showed up in our media and in politics here in the U.S. And so I have the great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. We have Rossana Cambron, who is the co-chair of the Communist Party USA. She recently visited China and was able to experience some of the progress that has been made in villages doing poverty alleviation work firsthand and sharing her experiences with us. And our moderator today is Krista, who is a Chinese American and has frequently traveled to China during her life. She has taught migrant children in Beijing and organized foreign service trips for university students at China Foreign Affairs University, and she'll be giving our discussion with her today. So if everyone could give a warm welcome for our speakers today. We're actually going to start our discussion today with a little bit of a primer. From this documentary called China's War on Poverty, which was put together by PBS. If you're familiar with this documentary, it was actually going to be aired on PBS, but due to reasons such as presumably xenophobia, it was actually canceled and not shown on PBS. But it's an excellent documentary that gives a great first-hand look into the issue. So we're going to play a couple of clips of that first to prime our conversation, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Who are identified in a place like that? They just get out of poverty. What's the prospect? Who's looking? I heads up my own problems. You need to name it both lines. Juan is 33 years old. He studied law at university. Before moving to Leland Building, he worked a city job at a rural credit cooperative.这个过程中，他会跟我说，然后他自己出没有钱的，那我就能成功。这个比如说，我就建议他放在小学方案，因为之前一直都机关工作，也没在人上班过，所以也经常就利用这个网上的时间啊，也会了解一下农区的情况、农村的情况。包括像我们现在开展的这个农业不满，我非常也One seems to me that the alleviation program is really like the gives no subsidies for education, microloans, medical insurance, home reparations, and if they are disabled, social security. 这边就是我们对今年初，当时我们年初的时候，我们出台3个月，对，我们列了一个他们的这个给这里叫王志标，他是今年1月份纳进来的，家里2个人口，2个有这个人民币啊，这个叫家庭人口3人。也是2个所以我们现在根据我们当时的一共分了35个区70人，进行做这个模拟调查。那这个很多，这些可能是我们把这个档案有介绍的，就是整个评估的这个时间，经过一系列的程序之后呢，现在对这里的要将这个评估纳入名单报到县里批复同意了之后，确认这里的符合评估的要求，再由这里在我们的全国统计系统里面输入这个评估的信息，这样在北京我们国家评估站就能看到它的这个评估的信息，这样就确认了这个评估的。那个有效，能看到啊？对，我们看灯亮，他说，对啊，走了。正如我们最做那个勤温度摸底排查嘛，就是我们想，就是通过这个调查多用文化等等这些高表的经历。有些情况你觉得，然后还有你这个新闻稿的那个本子，这些都拿给我，对我先拿下来。对，这块就是为什么我不给他们评估的？评估不是我给的，这个是村民投票评议出来的，他们家。2只手3口上都是解决的，包括他们的收入，包括我们这个评估线3月3万05元，对，这个说了啊。那我们对，然后 就是把我们说到那母不一样的话，没有变化，仍然是对，还是那个思考变化，还是发现。但做这个这个目标，我们要那为什么不方有方面？那个因为这个说我对，但是我对他的这个那什么的，到里面去拿也有这个电台，然后呢，他跟他们这个做的这个调查。
Believing that is important to the residents. Today, one of the things we did are reading us together with what about that.
要多写，你们能播吗？好，谢谢。这里有好吗？啊，没有。这里有吗？农村的工作啊，很多都是他们一边干活，我们当航使，然后跟他们聊天。本来治疗环境，像习近平总书记说的，这里擦根扁担都能发芽。你看现在是11月份了，但是呢，在北方现在也没落叶了，但是在南部只是绿油油的，现在还有收成。所以这个地方呢，只要农民肯干，我觉得都能发展。像平常一个上午，他们多切2个，就能在600到700斤，600到700斤之间的，就是6000到7000元这样。啊，这样对。早上讲东西多吗？啊，
Counselor is overseen by county party officials. They can go at any time to oversee the process and look for sign fraud section.
和他们要在再多核查几遍，然后在网络进行核对吧。这个我们在北看就是进行抽卡，这个是一般的，我们那边全面给有什么都比较就是这个我把这个收入啊这个跟很清楚的告诉我。
Well, not be told. And it can be said to have been the out already is what is called the democratic appraisal meeting. They got some products for one young girl or who.
Alrighty, hopefully that was a useful primer and background to our conversation. Get a little look into, the nitty gritty of the poverty alleviation process. This documentary came out in 2021. So the official poverty alleviation announcement happened after this documentary came out. So clearly at this time, there were still families who had not yet been lifted out of poverty, but since then that has changed. So yeah, with that, I'll invite our two speakers up and we'll begin our.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's really nice to see that people are interested in this topic. And thank you, Rossana, for being here to talk about your experiences. So after having watched that documentary, we want to hear from you about your trip to China, what you did, a summary of your itinerary, and just, tell us what you saw.
Well, first of all, this is the first time I've seen this video, and I tell you that it just filled my heart. You know, when I was a kid, my mother would say, eat all your food because there's kids starving in China. That was kind of like a saying, you know, to get your kids to eat food and stuff, you know. I never understood what the heck you really with me. Yeah. So, but the thought of 1.4 billion plus people no longer starving, no longer, you know, maybe they go hungry a little bit, but they all have food to eat. It's amazing, and it begins to ask the question, why not here? I don't know the math, but I know we're not near that. I think we're 300 million in the richest country in the world. Why cannot, you know, so that's what, when I first heard about the alleviation poverty was on my trip to China right before COVID hit. And it just sort of, this was like a tour. This was vacation tour that we went on. So it was just kind of surfaced, you know, not too much said. And their goal really was to meet it in 2020. But because of the pandemic, it set the whole thing back. But their goal really was to meet it about a year or so earlier. And so, you know, the first thing I questioned was, well, how did they do that? How do you lift, you know, that many people out of poverty? And so this time around, it was it has a long title, but we were invited by China to, along with 20 other delegation countries representing, we were 21 comrades representing 20 countries. There were 2 comrades from Nepal. And we were invited to come and look at what's going on and to talk about their modernization, which is their next phase of the moving into China, but their next phase, their next stage of development is what I want to say. And so that was the first thing, I went in with this idea of, okay, I hope they tell us how this all happened. And many of what you saw here in the video is exactly what we saw. We didn't see the village voting or anything, but we were told that this was the process. We were told that this is what happened. We were told that there were in several cases, it was an individual basis, that there were files on each, in these villages and stuff like that. And so that was the thing. So we were there for 2 weeks, almost 14 days. And we visited different places, and I'll just quickly tell you. We were in Beijing, from Beijing, we went to Anhui province, and then from Anhui province, we went to Nanjing province. And in each of those, we visited different schools, we visited hospitals, and museums, and I don't know if I keep talking or, I'm sorry.
Yeah, whatever. I will have more questions for you.
Okay, so we visited companies, for-profit companies, the AI tech, high-tech companies. I know I'm 60-something, 66 plus years old, but I'm a big tech junkie. I don't have the opportunity to really get into programming or anything like that, but I love technology. I just really like it. So I was really thrilled to go to this company because they showed us just the different technology that they're developing in terms of study, in terms of, those VR mat things. You can put that on and it's a professor teaching you about geology, but within that, it's like you're right there, in the sand dunes, or you're right there in the canyons and all of that kind of stuff, and teaching you. So it's really like a much better way of learning. I think many of us are visual learners instead of, and then here we're taught rote learning, not much anything else, So we visited just different things like that. And universities, there's a lot of Marxist universities where they teach there's cadre training in terms of, who's going to take the leadership or, in developing. And even in the communities, they have classes, Marxist classes for the village. When I was there before, they mentioned that that's the first thing they do when they started going into the villages, is to give us not a dogmatic kind of class on Marxism, but something that they can connect to with the village and show them that that it is possible to change, that it is possible for them to be alleviated out of poverty, and that these are some of the things that are needed, and of course the village, the people themselves will make it happen. And so, there's a big push for party growth, and I don't want to think, I'm really like this from my memory. No, definitely, yes.
So I forgot to give a summary of my plan. I'm gonna ask Rossana some general questions on poverty alleviation. And then I have some questions about systems of accountability. So like the village voting process that you saw and how the party kind of critiqued itself. And then I have some questions about how this might impact your organizing here, Rossana. So in between each of those sections, I'll pause a bit for audience questions, so you guys don't have to keep them in the back of your head. But the remaining questions I have for just about poverty alleviation in general. I was wondering if you could maybe share an anecdote or two about the villages that you went to. Where exactly did you see a village that had a poverty alleviation effort going, and maybe was there something that left a lasting impression that you want to share about?
Well, I get really emotional because it's something that's, where I live, I see homeless people every single day. out of the window of where I live. And so to not see that in any other country is just really gives me a lot of hope, because I think it's so unjust that people have to suffer this way. Anyway, so we did go to one area where the village, they connected all of their land and grew cabbage. They grew different fruits. We were taken to a grapevine, huge grapevine, and I took a few pictures of that. Where, you know, and so they of course, they work the land, they harvest it, and then they reap the benefits of it. We went to some areas where the village was converted into sort of like a old town field, what we would know here as an old town field. That, you know, you'd go and there's a bunch of little shops and people sell their things or whatever. Well, it was like that. They converted some of those villages to tourist areas. And so in one, they built this huge arch. And as you walk in, of course, you begin to see all the little shops. And they had a variety of types of things that people were selling, from their own crafts to, you know, just regular stuff like sodas and drinks and things like that. Jewelry, stuff like that. We also went to an indoor mall, so to speak. You know, but and I'm trying to give you an image from what we understand, what we experience here. So it would be like a room like this, and a bunch of tables, and people selling kind of their artwork or their crafts or some of their tea that they grew in their yard or their whatever, you know, and people would come in, and, you know, you're welcome to come in and buy whatever people want to buy and stuff like that. So once again, so these are like 3 different types of ways that people were able to make money, especially within the, you know, less of the rural areas, but more closer to the city and stuff.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think I mean, this is not surprising because China's such a big country, but I think one thing that strikes me is they really play to local strengths. Like, you know, the ecology of the region, like how they were doing urban nuts. If anyone watches this documentary, you'll see a Kazakh ethnic minority where there's businesses that train them how to milk their camels and sell their camel milk. And it sounds like you see some areas where they're leveraging tourism, some people, the people out of poverty. Okay, so I have one more question, and then I'm gonna allow people to ask some questions about poverty alleviation in general. So, and you did just touch on this a little bit earlier, but before going on this trip, knowing that China is like made all these leaps in poverty alleviation, what would you say your expectation or your kind of guess about how it happened was, and then what changed? What changed your expectations after you went to the country?
Well, I didn't really think about how they did it, you know. I mean, I really wasn't thinking what were some of the ways that they did it. I expected that they at some point would do it. I didn't expect that it was so close, that they were that close to lifting 1.4 billion. And that just always sticks in my mind is 1.4 billion people. And so, you know, it was, I think that's where I sort of, in my brain, I sort of just stopped, because it was so amazing to me, you know, that I didn't really think about, oh, how did they do it or whatever, but, you know, of course, I was, I mean, I did think about how they did it, but I didn't really go into with any preconceived notion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So like I said, I am going to launch into some questions later about the accountability process, but does anyone have any burning questions right now or comments?
My question is, In America, a lot of times we see these icons of class progression where it's on cars like that. Where
But
it's like-
Ours,
Yeah, so in my mind, a car would represent agency and being able to decide where you can go. And my question is, when people are lifted up from poverty, in what ways is their agency over their lives increased? And what advice are there to accomplish that?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question. You're talking about just feeling liberated, having been able to just,
In what ways
Do
are
what
they
they want.
empowered to control their life? That's
well, you know, what is the main, their main focus is people-centered. So, even though we hear, Xi Jinping thought, it's not really Xi Jinping thought, it is Xi Jinping representing the thought of the people. Everything is people-centered. Everything is, like we saw here, it's the village that's coming in and they decide some of the things. They say, we need this. And we want you as our representative to take it to the next level. And then that takes it to the higher level. And so then they figure out, okay, so how do we provide this for the village? So people there are able to have a complete voice, in a very democratic voice, then, you know, I mean, we can say, here, we want this, but we gotta sacrifice.
I can give an example.
Thank you.
So like you mentioned cars, which is like mobility is a big symbol of like having agency, right? As an overseas Chinese, I can tell it's always been kind of a sign of prestige for Chinese people to be able to go study abroad, to emigrate and go live abroad, right? So I think one thing that's really changing amongst young people in China is they're actually more and more proud of staying home because they have more opportunities at home now. And there is not as much of a perception, oh, just because you're able to go abroad, you're like so wealthy and educated. That's a big trend that's changed over the years, but people feel like they can live a good life at home. And so that's a sense of agency of like, I can pick where I want to live.
And they
Yeah.
promote
Yeah.
Chinese ideas and Chinese culture, as opposed to wanting to be adapting the Western culture, Western ideas. So, you know, that is really important too. You get to keep your culture and you don't have to be, you know, dressing like all of us here in the US. So it's
Any other?
So I had a question about the agriculture in rural areas. The impression I had was a couple, you know, went into this area and we started, you know, going down nuts. When you think about, you know, cooperative or, you know, imagining in small villages where there were, you know, 50 or 100 families, there would be a cooperative approach to farming. And that's another way that everybody would know kind of what each other was doing in terms of how they were doing things.
well, I don't think that it's cooperative in the way that we know it here. I think it's cooperative in that there's I don't know, maybe up to 12 families. Look at how many families they said in this area. They come together. We have this resource in our village. And we're going to work together to build it up so that we can all be lifted out of poverty. So that's sort of, you know, that's what the grapevine and, you know, all the different places that we visited were about. It's you know, you join together to work the land and you know, each one does whatever they need, whatever they can contribute to that. Does that answer the question? Yeah,
I can share one fact about the cooperatives, which I learned from watching a TV show about poverty alleviation in China. So, and also in this film, you'll see a lot of involvement from universities. So, I saw this one film where they were trying to sell mushrooms because there was a big market for mushrooms. So they would bring in university professors to go in and train people on, you know, how you can cultivate mushrooms. And these party cadre members, they're really responsible for doing the things that like you can really live yourself out of poverty by doing this. And so there's this show where this cadre goes from household to household saying, hey, please try this, and everyone's kind of like not super optimistic about it because they've always lived such a rough life. So yeah, it's kind of things like that that happen where they do regional partnerships or will from like wealthier areas and bring university students in. I'm sure if you look online, you'll find all kinds of different things that have happened in different areas.
yeah, there's not one thing that fits everything. It's
Yeah.
not one approach, it's a whole varied approach.
So you mentioned that there were two phases, the lifting out of poverty phase and then the modernization phase. Can you explain, I guess, what the goals are that you need to?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the question was an explanation of the difference between the lifting out of poverty phase and the modernization.
So oh, sorry. So, you know, the main goal, they have, every 5 years, they have a goal. And this last goal was to bring everybody out of extreme poverty. So now that everybody has a place to live, food to eat, healthcare, education. Now, when it's not like all high level everything, right? So it's not like everybody has an abundance of things or way of life, but they have at least the bare minimum. There is still poverty in China, you know, and not everybody has everything, so to speak. So the next phase is to now to modernize it, such as building those roads that give people access, such as the high-tech stuff, such as just being able to move forward. Now that, you know, okay, we're here, we're gonna move forward. But one of the things that China needs in order to really fully move forward is peace. And so that's why you hear on the news that they're meeting to try to build peace, try to promote peace among, you know, Putin and Zelensky and there was somebody else in the US, of course. But it's because peace is really important in order for China to be able to move forward in this next phase of their building of socialism, really is what it is. Socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Okay, one more question, and then I'm gonna launch into the next section, but I will open up.
It's also a question online too.
Okay.
Thank you. Were you on Voices of Vision Tuesday? WPFW?
Who, me?
Yes.
No.
Okay, all right. I heard a discussion tomorrow visiting China. What would you say is the biggest one or two obstacles in terms of American anti-China propaganda? What would you tell someone how one or two things they can do to combat? I have a friend, and it's hard for me to meet with him without him having some anti-China propaganda. This, that, whatever it is, can't tell you where he makes it from, but it's all, he's not doing it. So what would you say would be the best way to combat that, for those who have that here in America?
I'll repeat. Okay, so the question is how to combat anti-China propaganda. And I want to note that I'm going to do more questions on how this applies to this.
Well, I think first, with any kind of argument, you want to bring people at least one step closer to reality, to the truth. So, you know, you begin in that process. You're not gonna bring it, you know, you're not gonna bring somebody that's totally anti-China, pro-China in one or two arguments or one or two discussions. But I think being able to say, I just spoke to somebody who was there in China, or being able to say, look at this report that gives you a different perspective. One thing that I saw in China, I think it was the very first day we went to the international department, which is actually was a campus. I mean, it's a big place with different offices and this and that. But in the center of this was a monument that was as tall as the ceiling, with a big Chinese flag waving, but it's all in bronze, or, you know, it's a statue. It's a sculpture honoring all of the ethnic minorities of China. You know, so if China really had this problem with one ethnic minority, why would they build this gigantic sculpture honoring, you know, all the ethnic minorities in China? So even posing some of these kinds of questions is like, well, if that's true, then, you know, how did China alleviate poverty? Or, you know, just posing questions to them that kind of counter what their propaganda is telling them by saying, well, but did you know that they did this? How do you think they did it? You know, always being calm, you know, yeah. It is hard, yeah. But that's how we win people, you know, we do it calmly.
Okay, we can take the online.
I'll just do one.
Okay,
All right, we have one online question. Mike Data, sorry, mispronounced your name, that's his name. Did you have a chance to see any healthcare facilities or meet with health workers?
Yes. I actually went to China. This is my third time in China. The first time I went to China, it was another one of delegation. This was back in the early part of 2019, but I got really sick. And it turned out I had kidney stones, a lot of pain and everything, but the comrade there took me to the local emergency room. And now when we think emergency room here, what do we think of? I mean, unless we got really great private healthcare here, how long do you think we're gonna spend? And how much do we think it's gonna cost us, right? Yeah, so, you know, it's a full day or 12 hours, 24 hours in emergency room here. When I got there, one comrade was checking me in on one side, and I went directly to the office, to the triage area. They took my blood pressure, all my vitals right away. From the vitals, there was another little like kiosk, really, where they took blood work immediately. Now this is just like boom, boom, boom. And then I waited a little bit, I guess, to get the blood work results. I went to see a general doctor. And then I went to see, they sent me to see a urologist, a specialist. They sent me to a CAT scan, urine sample. They gave me an injection to help, you know, alleviate some of the pain. And then they sent me to the pharmacist to get, you know, when I went to see the specialist, I had my x-rays with me, and everything like this, right? So now think about all I had done, including medication, 4 hours. I was not there more than 4 hours. And it wasn't like the hospital was not empty. When I walked into where the specialists were, that place was packed and it was huge. I would say it was double the size, and there was a lot of people, and I was in pain, and I'm like, oh my God, you know, because I'm thinking my experience back at home, right, of healthcare and stuff. I was out in 4 hours, And I kept telling the comments, I'm gonna pay for my health care. I don't want anybody, they said, well, no, if you get hospitalized, then we're talking about paying, but we'll pay for the emergency. And I said, no, I felt bad. I said, no, I'll pay for it. And then I started thinking on the way home, I was like, oh my God, what if I don't have enough money to pay for it? Because they did all of this work and everything, and so they brought me the receipts. It was $65. $65. 4 hours, $65, and all of these tests, all of this care, and one general doctor, one specialist. And it wasn't because I was a delegate from the Communist Party, blah, blah, blah. No, it wasn't because of that. It was just that that's the way it was. So yes, I've had first-hand experience. This last time we did visit a modern hospital that also is their technology in terms of dictate what's that called? Not dictating, detecting, different, detecting anything that's wrong with you is much more modernized and everything. Now, this was considered a private hospital, so it wasn't like open to the whole public. But nonetheless, we did visit one of those hospitals.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm gonna ask a little bit about just how they tracked all this, how they kept people accountable. And I think to the point about anti-China propaganda, a lot of times if you read Western press about this, they'll say, oh, did they really lift these people out of poverty? Did they make their lives worse? So like really actually how did they figure out that these people are not poor people, right? So other than the kind of village voting process that you saw later on in the film, we see some higher level party members doing meetings where they basically criticize themselves and they criticize each other. And they quote Mao saying that self-criticism and criticism of others is the only corrective method to address contradictions among the people and enable democracy. So my question for you, Rossana, is what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with the way that the party is keeping each other accountable on these metrics? Do you have critiques of it?
Well, I think although it's really hard for us to look at ourselves and be mature about correcting our flaws, sometimes we need help. And sometimes we need each other to tell us, hey, did you know that you did this, this, and that? Or this is how it came across, things like that. So I think that is a very important way to improve the human flaws that capitalism have injected in us. To be able to count on somebody to be very honest with you and say, you know what? And it's not about your appearance, or it's not about anything. It's about, are you collective? Are you thinking just solely of yourself? Are you being divisive? Are you being constructive? All of those things, So, and that's the only way we're going to be able to really change the necessary things that are needed for us to really move forward. And so I think it's a very good lesson. But we have to be open and mature about taking it,
So my next question is just, what are your thoughts on the systems of accountability in general? And if you could share anything that wasn't already kind of touched on in the movie that you might have seen as far as how they correct each other, how they keep track of this. Can you think of anything that they shared with you?
No, that really wasn't presented in terms of like their accountability. They did say that there is still corruption and we're still dealing with corruption. They're very committed to eliminating corruption. But there's still some of that going on.
Yeah.
And it's understandable.
Okay, so thank you, Rossana, and I think we'll does anyone have questions on accountability related stuff? I really geek out over this because I actually work for the US Census Bureau, so this is my job.
Mhm.
So seeing the way that they track things, like it's not just straight numbers, it's also the village itself votes and makes sure that they're correct and they're like, are you counting your kids and everything? And it's very crazy. So I'll pause for like 2 minutes.
Well, I thought the individual files were kind of astounding. To me, but billions of these files, you know, where there's a file on every household and they have certain criteria that they follow to determine whether the poverty level has increased or, I mean, I just thought that was unbelievable, but I'm imagining that at some point, some of this is computerized. But even so, I mean, that's just a very concrete way of establishing what's happening in, you know, particularly in that rural community. But outside, I mean, I'm shooting poverty outside in rural areas is it handled differently in terms of how they track it or determine, you know, the household poverty level.
Okay, so the question is outside of rural areas, is there a difference in how they track households on their property? You have an answer?
Yeah, we visited some areas that are like within Beijing. I think it was Beijing. Or maybe it was Hungary, I don't remember, but is that how you pronounce it? Is it Hungary?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Beijing, yeah.
No, the other one, and Anhui?
Oh, Anhui.
Anhui, yeah. Anyway, we did visit some areas, and what they do is they have these community centers, again, about at various in size, but we visited several of them, where they had, one of them had little stations, like if you're walking into the DMV, let's say, they had little different stations that help people with filling out forms, filling out whatever it is that they need, getting immediate health care. If they need, even they even had a small area for immediate mental health care, child care. And then they have a whole variety of classes that they offer, like we have like our community center, you know, but this one is more to encourage your culture, the different things like that. And but at every part of China, their methods were different, of course, because the situations were different. But everyone was able to, you know, in some way or another, they found a way to alleviate poverty within either those large communities where, you know, the buildings are, I don't know how many floors, do you know how many floors? 100 floors or something like that, and they're all residents, you know, they're all apartment buildings, but on the ground floor, they have all of these services. There's one picture where what they did, because it's all, they also have a communist party, a local, like a club, you know, within that. And they have a library, and they built this huge bookcase in the shape of a hammer and sickle. And I thought, oh, this is really cute. So I'm gonna take a picture for all my comrades, because I know they're gonna love this part. But so they do, they provide all kinds of services. They even have, what they call, like dance nights, so that the young people could come in and dance together and get to know each other and, you know, maybe spark relationships and stuff like that. But they have a whole variety of programs and services that are offered throughout China. Does that answer your question?
Well, in terms of the services, not so much the accountability, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not foolproof. I don't think they're not at the foolproof point, I don't think.
Yeah, and I don't completely know the answer to your question, but I do know that most of the urban poor are migrant workers from more rural areas. And this could have changed because I haven't looked into this for a long time, but there is a pretty strong, registration system for people as far as like what their hometown is. So a lot of these migrant workers, they still have, what's called kupo, like links to their hometown. So some of that kind of dictates like your benefits, and like your official income status and things like that. So even though like you saw a lot of people talking about like their migrant children, a lot of them like their numbers would still be linked to their hometown. Any other questions? Yeah.
On that piece about the children, I noticed in the film that some of the villagers were disputing the calculation of the family poverty level that you're not having the children. So my question is, in cases where the villagers don't take the decision that they want, how do they keep them engaged in that communal process, that support process?
Okay, so I'll repeat the question, which is, basically, in a situation where the villagers don't agree, how do they keep them within the participatory process? I have some comments, but I don't know if I have an exact answer.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an exact answer either.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, and I guess I'm making an assumption, but it's based on what I saw and based on their people-centered philosophy and applying the principles of Marxism, that they will listen to the dispute, but at the end of the day, they're going to make the judgment based on all of their findings, which is what the video showed. They investigated and they re-investigated, they re-look at the numbers, and they listen to the village people and make a decision. Now, maybe one or two slip by, but eventually they'll get caught because people are being also are being helped to see that that they're all part of the whole, and so that and equality is really important, and all of those kinds of values. So that my guesses would be that eventually they'll get caught if they slip by. I'm sorry.
So one thing I know, which might not completely answer your question, is there are certain red lines where they don't force people to do certain things. So if there, one example you'll see if you watch this movie is some villages, they want to completely relocate because the land is so poor and it's like very much a nature of their place that makes these people poor. So they want to, some entire villages, they try to relocate to a more urban area where there's more opportunities. So say, there's this agreement about, do we want to move our village? What things do we want to invest in as far as like cadre members coming to transport everyone over and like subsidizing housing. So one red line they talk about is they never force people to if they're in disagreement. So they kind of talk about one specific village where this guy, he goes on about how we live on our life here, but our ancestors are going to be here and they don't want to move. So I imagine there might be some scenarios where higher up party leadership, they might override certain things, but there are some official red lines that they don't force people on.
Yeah, and in one of the villages that we visited, they pointed out some homes that said, oh, these people are elderly and they refuse to move. So the government came in and restored their living area. There was another couple that also refused to move. And what they did is they did this beautiful garden outside. And so they allow people to, you don't have to pay to get in, but they allow people to enjoy the garden that they built. But they also didn't want to move. But again, the government helped them to renovate their living quarters so that they could live decently.
Okay, so now I'm gonna launch into the part that probably most of us are interested in, is how can we apply some of these learnings to our context here in the US. So I guess my first question for you, Rossana, on this is just how have your trips to China influenced your organizing?
Sure. I mean, I think it reemphasized the people-centered approach. For us here, it's building in our communities. You know, wherever we are, that's what we want to build. That's what we want to get involved. And because that's really to me, that's the important model that works. It's being on the ground with the community, being able to even have discussions and arguments with folks. But help give a different perspective of what's not only what's going on in China, but what's also going on here in the US. You know, there's all kinds of propaganda that we have to deal with here. The other thing is, you know, the urgency of fighting for peace here in the United States. You know, building that peace movement that is necessary, because whatever happens here in the US affects the entire world. Really, really, but on a very large scale, you know, so whatever we can gain here, it really affects the world. And so if we can build this strong peace movement, you know, we can help guarantee that other countries are allowed to develop with their own, with however they determine. You know, we see Cuba is really being strangled, so to speak. They're being starved because not just of the embargo and the blockade, but because they're on the terrorist list. And that has wiped out even more of the resources that they had available to them. They don't have gasoline to even move about. You know, this past May Day, if you've all seen the May Day celebrations in the past, you know, you'd see millions of people on, you know, that main square in Havana. What they decided this year, because of the gasoline shortage, was in small little towns, everybody would have their own little thing, you know, and they actually had to postpone it because there was a hurricane on May 1st, so they had to postpone that as well. But nonetheless, they are literally going hungry because they are not able to get the necessary funds. They return back to the ration book that they have to do with it. It's so devastating in my mind that the US and that we here allow that kind of shit to happen. People that are coming from Venezuela, they're migrating from Venezuela. Again, it's the sanctions. All the countries, you know, immigrants coming from the different countries because we are allowing these sanctions. So we've got to fight against those things. And these are the important things that I think are important, along with the issues that we face here, you know, like the jobs, healthcare, you know, schooling, even a place to live. So it definitely has cemented even stronger my commitment to these issues.
Okay, so I'll ask one more question and then open it up. So later in this movie, there are party members who say, you know, this poverty alleviation approach works for China. Like, we think this works well here and probably no other country could really do it like this. So I just want to ask from your perspective, you know, when you think about the US, what do you agree with that sentiment that the Chinese model really works for China? What do you think are things that could be applied here? How do you think it might have to look different here in the US? Yeah.
Well, I think many of them, the process could work here, you know, on an individual basis, on a community basis. I think, you know, being people-centered, once again, putting people before profits is key, and that's what they've done. They're doing in China. The government has regulations in all of these companies and stuff. So I think, of course, you know, in the United States, there's different conditions where in some ways a little bit more developed. And set up to really do this. We already have an abundance here in the United States that we can just, if we just switch to people before profits, in no time, I think we can get there faster than China has gotten there. I was just at the Poor People's Campaign. 140 million people are one paycheck away, $400 away from poverty. I mean, from homelessness and extreme poverty and all of that kind of thing. And these are statistics that you can look online, they have a whole research. So the war on poverty and poverty is the 4th leading killer here in the United States. How did these turn? Anyway, it's even greater than homicide. So you're more likely to die of poverty than somebody shooting you somewhere. That's how bad it is. And so that's what the Poor People's Campaign is doing, is waging this war on poverty. And it addresses, we visited as many members of Congress and senators while we were here on Tuesday, all urging them to be mindful of passing legislation for people, because people are dying and poverty is murder. So I think, we're at the very beginning stages of even struggling to do that. But I think that in the end, once we make that switch, I think we can just get there much faster.
Do we have any questions online?
There was one from earlier, when we asked it. Yeah, this is kind of a full-sided question, but I think they're being genuine. It said, what kind of attitude, okay, so what kind of attitude do the Chinese people have to their government? It's talking about English issue here, but are they grateful or angry? And I still hear a lot of conversation that people want to leave the country and the government trying to control them. They also just like more positive comments in the chat, so I'll be there. Some action there, but.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I didn't see anybody badmouthing the Chinese government. When I was there, the second time I was there on vacation, our tour guide, and I don't remember the entire conversation, but what I do remember is her saying, I don't care what you call it, communism, socialism, or whatever. I just know it's getting better. Things are getting better. Call it what you want, but I have a job. Things are getting better for me and my children. Me and my child, I forget what she had. So that sort of rang to me, was like, she didn't really care what you called it. What she cared was that her aspirations in life were getting better. Her needs were being met. So.
Yeah, and I think, you can always find it in any kind of anecdote, right? It's such a big country. And whether or not you trusted a lot of the public opinion polls, even out of Western institutions like Harvard, there's been a big increase in like the support for the Communist Party among the people. And actually throughout COVID, that number has also increased. So yeah, other than anecdotes, statistically, I think it's looking quite good, actually.
Yeah. I wanted to add something. We do get a lot of propaganda here, anti-China propaganda, anti-Cuba, Venezuela, all the countries that are Vietnam, all the countries that are trying to build socialism in their own countries. And I think we have to be very mindful of looking at the deeper question, asking the deeper question, looking further, digging deeper, doing our research before we believe the propaganda, because we know that's thick here. Our battle is in the battle of ideas, because it is so thick. And so we have to get into the practice of looking deeper into the issues and looking deeper into things that we hear. Don't just take it from, and even within our own communities and our own organizations, when you hear gossip, look deeper into it, because there's just so much attempts to divide just by, oh, did you hear this, did you hear that or whatever? No, just look deeper, ask the question, go to the source. In El Salvador, I met some friends from El Salvador who fought in the war. And one of the things that has stuck with me about some of what they said was that they developed an understanding and a discipline that if they heard anything about someone else, like, oh, she told, she's bad mouthing you or he's bad mouthing you, then you go directly to the person and say, this person said, you said this about me. Can you explain? Without creating and letting these things fester and thinking that the person hates you, but in reality, that's not what they said, or they were misunderstood, or the one who said it is trying to spread division, And so I think we have to develop that kind of mindset and that type of way of our behavior, that kind of way to being, instead of immediately, hating somebody because they just said, you heard that they said this or that. And of course, money is a big deal. Oh, did you hear somebody stole this money? Or, there was some comment about, we're raising money because we want to be rich in the party or something. Some sort of thing. I mean, but these are ways to divide people, and to show mistrust. And they're very subtle. You don't always catch them, but we have to get in the habit of catching them. Otherwise, we're going to fall prey. And what we're going to do is divide the party, divide our movement, and the people that end up suffering are those that are living in the street and those that do not have a voice. And they are our priority in anything that we do and anything that we are involved with.
Okay, any other final questions before we wrap up?
So one question. So so from your personal experience, you've been there 3 times. How is it being a woman of color traveling to this vast country that doesn't have any Latinos or Mexican American people there? I got there in South Dakota when I was a college student, and the only people I saw that were Black were African immigrants, where they spoke Mandarin and I spoke English. Now I couldn't communicate with my own people. So it was very awkward, but I never really dealt with any instances of racism in China. I know some weirdness around athletes and Black people on the Great Wall. Once in a while, I was like, hey, it was like, okay, that's just weird. But yeah, no police violence, attacks on Black people generally, and it's obviously historic. Tied to the Black liberation movement, going back to the now period, there's a whole book about it that's great. But China's not perfect. There are always issues, but people try to frame China as like, oh, it's racist or something like that, because there's emphasis around like Africans be treated a certain way in past years, so they denounce that in those regions. But hey, that's why your personal opinion and personal experience is that going to that country, not only the communist state, it's a very thing that country comes from.
So the question is, what was it like being a woman of color in China?
Well, I don't think many Chinese have seen a Mexican lady, or a Mexican woman, period. But it wasn't like I got stares or, people looked at me funny, that kind of a thing. I didn't feel like I was being treated any differently. I was aware that I was a Mexican lady in China, and I was happy to be able to share that I am from Mexico, that my ancestors are from Mexico, and share any experiences that we have. But in terms, and of course, I didn't see the police in China. I just didn't see anybody. So I couldn't tell you about police brutality. I don't think there's any, there's no need, apparently there's no need for police, otherwise if there was, there would be a whole bunch, But, so yeah, I think we did go to the Great Wall because there's a belief about visiting the Great Wall. I don't know if you know. We were told that there's a belief you have to go visit the Great Wall to have a safe journey. I think that's what he said. But anyway, that was one of the first things that we went. And we did go to the Great Wall, where there's a lot of other people. And sometimes people would look at me trying to figure out where she's from, And it's like, because I'm not your typical US American, and I don't come from wealth, I'm a working class, I come from working class background, and all of that, so I would imagine, somebody who took a good look at me was trying to figure out who the hell I was. But I didn't mind answering questions or anything like that. I think it's important to help people educate, and that's what I was representing, not just the US and our party, but my culture as well. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the Claudia Jones School for putting this on. And thank you, Rossana.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just have a couple of closing thoughts. Thank you again to Krista and Rossana. Can we give them another? Say, if you ever go to the Great Wall and you look like anything other than an average Chinese person, someone will say something to you, and that includes me as a child. So just know that it's a rite of passage that you want to experience. So yeah, I mean, I learned so much from this conversation, and I think that building understanding of China amongst folks in this country is particularly important right now. And this is also a very personal issue for so many of us who are Chinese Americans. I sometimes tell the story that my mother was born on a pile of sand in like the middle of the countryside in China because my grandparents' village was too far away from a hospital or a clinic. And to know that now, less than 60 years later, nearly 100% of births in China have a skilled birth attendant attending it is an incredible achievement. And of course, that's just one of the many ways that China has made incredible progress in poverty alleviation, but this is very personal for a lot of us. I know it's personal for Krista as well. So we really hope to continue this work on international understanding and solidarity. We are hoping, as the Claudia Jones School, to have further events in China and make this a series. So if you have any suggestions for further topics, let any of us know. We're happy to do that and work together on that. And in closing, I want to say that Rossana also mentioned how the people of Cuba are being strangled by policies being imposed by the US right now. And so if you are interested in furthering your commitment to solidarity in general, one really big thing you can do is attend a rally this Sunday outside the White House to urge Biden to take Cuba off the state-sponsored terrorism list and lift all US sanctions against Cuba. So that event will be this Sunday at 1:30 p.m. I hope to see you all there to continue this important work that we're all trying to do. So thank you again so much, and I hope you have a great evening.